welcome everyone to a special edition of Uptown After Dark. We have Alex. Please introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself. How you doing?
Hi, doing well. Thank you for having me. Yes, my name is Alex Liu. I'm a science and health reporter, and I have a new documentary coming out called A Sexplanation. It is my attempt, my quest to get a comprehensive sex education for the first time in my life, no matter how awkward and painful it gets. And it does get a little awkward and painful at times.
That's interesting. So what made you decide that you want to put together this documentary? Like, what was going through? What was the process when you were developing this? What made you decide you wanted to do this?
Yeah, so I think this has been something that honestly has been brewing inside me probably since puberty. I'm gay, and I think, frankly, the schools, the culture, the media did not prepare me or my family to deal with what that would entail and deal with kind of the deep shame that I had about that fact. It was a incredibly difficult, painful situation for the entire family, and I think into my 20s, that shame was useful in terms of being giving myself a sense of purpose and meaning. That shame fueled a lot of anger and fueled me to become a health reporter. It fueled me to be an activist for same-sex marriage and marriage equality. But by the time I was in my 30s, I think I just didn't have the emotional energy anymore to deal with that anger. The anger was not serving me anyway. It was very destructive in many ways. And so I think the movie was a way to kind of process a lot of that and really I started to realize after help with a lot of therapy that the you know the anger was really just a way for me to control and project outward the deep shame I still had. So the movie was just a way for me to finally come to terms with a lot of the things that I've been repressing for my entire life.
Well, I mean, thank God, you found a constructive way to channel that pain and that shame and all of those emotions. Because I mean, you definitely a lot of people don't find constructive ways to deal with that sort of emotion, and they usually find destructive ways of dealing with it. So I mean, you definitely got to look at it from that point, that what I'm saying, if it gave you a purpose and you got a nice beautiful baby called a Sexplanation out of it, then it
Yes,
was all worth it. You know what I
totally.
mean?
And I think if I hadn't had the support of my family, if I hadn't the support of great therapists, friends, I would have gone on a very much more destructive path, just as you said. And I think the movie is also kind of a hope. Hopefully, is something that gives people a little hope that there is maybe another way, and that sex and sexuality, especially if you're a sexual minority, especially if you're a woman, it can be something that is actually a beautiful, transcendent part of your life if you let it.
So why do you think that there is so much shame attached to sexuality in general, whether you're a trans person, whether you're gay, straight, bi? Why do you think that
Mhm.
there's so much shame attached to sexuality?
That's a great question, and I think a lot of people have a lot of different answers. But I think at its core, shame is just the most kind of powerful tool societies have to control bodies, right? I think at its very core, that because sex and sexuality is so tightly wrapped around reproduction and then also wrapped around disease, that you know so many institutions, from religion, government, schools, media, they have this huge interest to try to control how we use our bodies in a way that serves maybe uh creating an army or creating a bigger population or creating more workers, but they're not put together to create happy, healthy, spiritually well people. And I think shame is just that. It's the most effective tool we have to deal with how to control people's sexuality. But what happens, though, it's such a blunt tool that it just caused so much suffering in many people, and many people who frankly aren't in the majority do get kind of crushed under the weight of these agendas that have nothing to do with human happiness.
I mean, it's not just control of the body, but it's control of the mind too, right?
Totally.
Because a lot of the things that people have to deal with when it comes down to sexuality it lives in their brain rent free
Totally.
and totally controls that all of their actions moving forward. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So um
that's well put.
how do you think people could communicate and have these conversations about sex without having the shame element there?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think before I started this process, um, I was actually becoming the person, the type of person I hated, right? Like I grew up Catholic, right? And I think the Catholic Church did just a number on my family and so many other families in the world. And I was so angry at the Catholic Church that I did like everything in my power to do the exact opposite of what they were teaching, right? So I had a lot of indiscriminate sex with a lot of people I, don't even really know that well. I was doing a lot of things that I think made me what I would call liberated or let go of my shame. But what was happening, I think, really, if some gay man, let's say, came up to me at that time in my life, my 20s, and said something like, I actually don't enjoy anal sex, let's say, I would have just come so hard down on them and said something like, that's because you're repressed, you internalized homophobia, you're letting the Catholic Church win. And I was becoming a person who was shaming people. I was becoming a person just on the opposite end of the spectrum who I was not a person. I was not what I wanted to be, which is a place of non-judgmental listening, a place that would de-shame a situation. And so what I've learned through this process of making this movie, that if what I want from others is, acceptance, tolerance, love, I have to be willing to do the same, even if I disagree with you, or even if I have certain biases or around my own, what I think is best for them, right? Because that's good. And the hell, what is the road to hell is paved with good intentions. You don't realize, you think you're doing good, but ultimately you're just making things even worse in many ways. So I think the one thing I've learned is that to be that person of just pure listening, to create that safe space that when people talk to you, if they feel like they can actually, that you're actually listening to them, you're withholding your judgments. Everyone's gonna have a judgment. Everyone's gonna have a bias. It's easy to feel disgust. You can't control that. But what you can control is, do you let it show? Do you let it actually, infiltrate that relationship? And if you can actually be that person, and it takes energy, it takes emotional work, but if you can be that place of just listening and love and acceptance for a person, no matter where they are in their journey, even if they are repressed and internalized homophobia or whatever it is, if you can be that place of listening, that's the only chance that person has of letting go of that shame. When you feel heard and you feel loved, no matter where you are in your journey, there's just no greater feeling. That feeling of belonging is the only thing that can let go of shame.
I think that was very well said. I mean, I think that everybody judges, but I think people should learn to judge more objectively and remove the emotional component from how they're judging. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if you want to judge it and look at it from a logical standpoint and try to be more logical about it, or just not judge at all. But I think if people would just learn to judge objectively, people could be able to have conversations with each other. And even if you guys can't, you come to an impasse and you can't agree, just being able to agree to disagree. Because I feel like the way society is kind of set up now, if you don't agree with somebody, they want to put a label on you. They want to say
Totally.
you have some sort of phobia. Like when it's just, I don't agree with you. It's not because I have any phobia or I'm scared of anything. It's just that I don't agree with you, and that's okay.
That's beautifully put, because I think what I've learned in this process, and I was, forced to talk to people I disagree with in making this movie. And, when you're on, when you're on,
when you spoke to the, I think the senator.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I could tell that you really strongly disagreed.
Right.
Yeah.
And it took, if there wasn't a camera in the room, I might have reacted a lot more negatively, right? I might have really been there and telling, like, giving him a lot of hell. But because because you see yourself on camera and you realize very quickly, that, oh gosh, like I'm actually, do I want him to see my humanity, but am I seeing his humanity? Even though I disagree with him 100%, even though I would never vote for him, like he's still a human being, and being a human being is just, it's its own special, you have to respect the humanity in a person if you have any chance of coming to any form of at least
Neutral ground.
understanding. Yeah, understanding. And I came away with that from that interaction. Again, like not ever wanting to vote for him, disagreeing with him, but being like, if you were my neighbor, I bet he would be lovely to be a neighbor. He's thoughtful. He was willing to listen to me. He was willing to engage with my arguments, even though he disagreed. And I think that's kind of a much more fun way to live than like stick to your bubble, stick to your tribe. Anything that goes against it is bad. I mean, that just seems so exhausting after a while.
I mean, even though I could see from when I watched the doc that you guys clearly had opposing opinions. It was great to see two people with opposing opinions, and not only that, but opposing opinions from two completely different lifestyles, right? You're a gay Asian man, he's a straight,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying, white man.
Yeah.
And the fact that you guys were able to have a conversation and have civil conversation without it being heated, but still come to an impasse, and you agree to disagree, but it still remains civil. Like it's so much that people could, if they really like dig into the nuance of that, how important that is.
Oh, well, thank you for saying that because it was it took a long time for me to get there. I get the if I had that interview even a year ago, I would have gone there and totally in bad faith. I would have gone there to like I said, destroy him, to make him look as bad as he could on camera, because he would have been the person that represented why I was in so much pain. But in a weird way, going through this process, realizing that actually the only way to heal my pain is to start to see the humanity in other people, to actually be the person that you want other people to be. That was a huge, flip in my mind. And that's just been a totally unexpected, but very, very enjoyable part of this whole process.
Why do you think that sex is such a, I mean, it's one of those things, it's very intrusive to ask somebody like about their sexuality. But yet these conversations clearly need to be had so that way people could try to understand each other better, right? So do you think that there's a way to have these intrusive conversations, but still kind of find a way to get people to understand and respect each other better for whatever the differences may be, but not be so intrusive?
I love that question because it's something I struggle with a lot. And I think, there is, I think sometimes I would myself misunderstand like shame and privacy, right? And I think a good way to think about that is like the act of masturbation is not inherently shameful. It's totally great, but we don't all masturbate in public because it makes people uncomfortable. It's something you do in private, right? But you maybe can masturbate with a loved one. There are people in your life who you do let in, right? And that's and I think that's kind of how I think about how you talk about these things. Like if you were to meet someone for the first time and start talking about sex in a very personal way, I think that's kind of unconsensual. It's kind of like in that weird kind of gray area. But I think the people who you really love, who really love you, I think a lot about how, I'm married now, and I hid the fact that I masturbated for my husband for years, even though we've had full intercourse. Like the people you choose to share these things with, I think, is something that takes time, a lot of time. You have to put the trust in. You have to show you have to show you're there for the good intentions. You're not there to hear about these things for any salacious ways. You're here to actually be just someone of listening. I think it takes a lot of time to get to that point of intimacy where you can have these conversations. And so that's one thing I would say. And the other thing I would say is, I think I can only speak from like kind of my gay male perspective, but like we have, kind of a fun thing we do. We have brunch, after a big night out, and we talk about all the sexual conquests we have, right? And I think that's one thing that's maybe it's also a male thing, but like I think we're willing to talk about that. We're willing to talk about that in a but it's kind of a very surface level thing, right? It's like look who I got last night, look what I did, blah blah blah. Like look, I did this, but we're not actually talking about what's under the surface. Like actually, it didn't go well. There was like a moment when we had sex where I was unsure if this was consensual or not. These really tricky, touchy kind of things that I think that we all need to talk about. And I think it is, again, just baby steps. I think if sometimes it just requires talking about celebrities you hear who have the same situation, talking about little things and establishing that sense of safe space and trust through small conversations. And hopefully over time, you can kind of get to a place where you're talking about the real meat of what we need to talk about. And ultimately, I think a lot of people, especially those who are really close to you, family, friends you've known for years, decades, sometimes I think I've been more surprised often than not. Some people aren't willing to have the conversation, and I won't push. But some people I think have been waiting to have this conversation for such a long time. They just didn't know how, because we don't have a good modeling around that. And just that small amount of permission being like, have you ever thought about this? Like, is this a thing that's weird to you? Or like, do you masturbate like all the time? Or just little things like that, I think has been great to actually get so much closer with my friends and families. We know each other so much more. We love each other much more for who we actually are as a full human being. So I think it is trial and error. You're going to make mistakes. It's going to get a little, sticky at times. But if you kind of put the work in day by day, little by little, I think you'll be amazed over the course of 1 to 5 years just how much more substantive the conversations around sex can be.
Got it. I think that one of the things that I remember you talked about during the doc was sex education. And I think that probably plays a key component. Like if you can get teens, because that's when people usually start thinking about having sex in their teens, right? So if you can get teens to comfortably have safe spaces where they can talk about their sexuality, they can talk about the things that they're feeling, they can learn things about their body and themselves that don't include the shameful parts where they, you just want to show people pictures and of STDs and
Right.
show people the dark side of sex, right?
Yeah.
Then as people transition into adulthood, they'll feel more comfortable having these conversations because the groundwork was already laid down in high school to make people feel comfortable when they first started thinking about sex, to want to just be able to feel comfortable having these conversations. But because that doesn't happen anymore, like you have adults that just grow up, and the reality is most people aren't having these conversations at home. So if you're not at home and you're not having these conversations at school, then you usually have these conversations with your friends that don't know more than you. So
right, exactly.
It's the blind leading the blind, right? They don't know more.
Blind leading the blind for sure. Yeah. And I think one of the things I think sometimes it helps to get really like technical. Like there are just as if you're a parent, especially, you teach your kids every part of the body, but often you skip saying like penis or vulva and their body parts, right? There's nothing inherently shameful about them. But I get that it's uncomfortable to talk about. But by saying those,
my children body parts, that's important.
Yeah, and just by showing your kids that you're not afraid to say these words gives them the confidence that, oh, if I have a question about my penis, I can go to my parent rather than go to my friend, which maybe would be, what parent would want that, and so, and it does, it can get tricky at times. And I think I have a lot of sympathy and empathy for parents who feel uncomfortable around that. Because sometimes kids, they'll keep asking why. They'll ask questions like, what does sperm look like? What does sex look like? Or what does it feel like? And these questions we're not trained to talk about. And I think it's just important that age appropriate, your kid the best. I hate, it makes me so sad to think that people often go straight to like, oh, you're going to teach your kids how to have sex at 5. That's horrible. But then no. The point is that you can't stop your kids from having these questions. Their kids are curious, and it's incumbent on all of us, especially the trusted parents and adults in a kid's life. Just matter of factly, very normally, 30 seconds, just show them like, oh yeah, it's, it's this at a level that they can kind of understand. And you'll be amazed how kids just go to the next question about dinosaurs or rabbits or whatever it is. If you treat sex as just a normal part of the human existence of planet Earth, they'll then come to you with all their real questions when they get older, and you'll set them up for so much more success.
True. I mean, it kind of starts where if the parent didn't grow up in an environment where
Yeah,
that was
totally.
commonplace and they felt comfortable. Sometimes people unknowingly repeat cycles,
Oh yeah, it's
right?
yeah. I've told that's what I was saying. I've told empathy for parents who I'm not. I used to be in a place where I would blame parents, but there's no blame really. It's just the cycle of like you said, the repeating these cycles, um, and and um, and unfortunately, though, the silence is often kind of the largest shaming message we give. And so I think if this is something that's important to you, you know, take the time to really think about what's most important, and if you can kind of work past that shame and work past that silence, and get help if you need to. I think I'm such an advocate of getting help from talk to other parents, talk to other adults, talk to other people that you trust about how do you deal with this, how are you dealing with this in your house, because it's when you get that tribe, that community together, that's the best way to really dismantle these cycles.
Okay. So we've been doing a lot of talk about this doc, but we haven't talked about where people can find it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So we're gonna be streaming worldwide on all the major kind of you can rent or buy on all the major platforms worldwide. If you go to asexplanation.com, you'll be able to see where in your country you can get it. It kind of becomes available. It should be, I think, by the time this comes out, it should be the available. And if you follow us on social media at A Sexplanation on all the platforms, you'll also see kind of more events and fun things. Hopefully, they'll be doing with the movie.
Okay. Is it also I thought it was gonna be on, which channel is that?
Oh yes, and it's playing on Fuse TV.
Views, yeah.
Yeah. All for the rest of the year. You can catch it on there, or they're streaming Fuse Plus streaming platform. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what do you think has been the thing that you learned the most about yourself during this journey?
The thing that I've learned the most about myself during this journey is it's kind of what we were talking about before, that I've been so angry for such a long time that really was a mask for a deep shame, that what I needed the most wasn't for the world to accept and love me. It was for me to love and accept the world as it is, and to hopefully be that person, that place people can go to really start to let go of a lot of their defenses, or let go of a lot of their shames. And in that, in being of service to people, of being a true friend, to really love someone, to actually let them, to connect with them on that human level. That was what I needed to do. I think often we think about like sex or love as something that we get, like it's something that's owed to us, something that we deserve, and that might be true. But the best way to get it is to give it, and that's the kind of a new lesson that I'm just kind of internalizing, and just trying to figure out that the best way to get and give love, to get love, is to give it out.
That makes a hell of a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely, like I said, I was happy when we first started to connect and talk about doing this interview, and I definitely enjoyed watching the doc.
Oh, thank you.
I'm probably gonna watch it again.
Oh, great.
Yeah. I mean, because sometimes you have to like watch things multiple times, because there might be like little nuggets that you missed the first go around, and then you watch it again and you're like, oh, word, I never paid it. Because I mean, it's definitely, I could have missed something just off the sheer laughter that I had in certain moments.
Thanks.
And I'm laughing so hard that there's obviously conversation that's continuing to happen as I'm laughing, but I might have missed it because I'm in the midst of just laughing at scenarios that I just think are.
Oh, that means so much. Yeah, we've spent a lot of time trying to make the movie as funny and engaging as possible, because we think ultimately, like, the shared experience of a humorous moment, that the shame cannot live in that moment. So we were thinking the best way to help people release shame is just to laugh at the absurdity of the situation we all find ourselves in. And hopefully we made a movie that often documentaries can feel like homework, and hopefully this documentary doesn't feel like homework. It feels like a really funny, engaging kind of journey of sexual liberation.
I definitely agree. So before we close out, do you have any final thoughts, any final remarks? You want to let everybody know where they can stream it again? Anything you got to say, let me know.
Yeah, no, go to a sexplanation.com or any of our a Sexplanation on any of our social platforms. That will be the best way to keep in touch. And we're hoping to do a if you live in the South, we're hoping to do a Southern tour because we think it would be fun, kind of to go to some places that maybe need a little more of this message.
Make
Yeah,
sure you have security.
yeah.
If you're going in the deep South, you might want to make sure you have some security with you.
We are thinking through every possibility for sure. I appreciate that, and yeah, just thank you for your time. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate this time.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I think my final words for this interview are gonna be, who gives a fuck about what you do in your bedroom, right? Like at the end of the day, uh, if you're a good person, you have a good heart, you have a good spirit, your energy is good. Who cares about? I don't care, like, about what you do in your bedroom. Like, it's nobody's business. And I think to shame anyone just because I'm overly concerning myself about something that's none of my goddamn business anyway, you know what I'm saying,
Totally.
is just ridiculous. Because what someone else does in their bedroom is none of my business.
Yeah,
You
life is
know?
hard enough. Let someone just enjoy it for a little bit, I say. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is, you know what I'm saying? I don't understand why people invest so much time and energy into worrying about business that is not theirs. You know?
Yeah, and I sometimes wonder if it's maybe because they're too scared, kind of like I was, too scared of what's actually going inside their own mind to really, and the only way they can kind of feel like they have any sense of control is to kind of take it out on others.
Yeah, I mean, well, hopefully people, can, like I said, there's definitely things not only about sexuality, but things just about humanity and being able to actively converse with another human being that you have an extremely different lifestyle than, but still be able to have. I think, honestly, for me, that probably was the most important thing that I took from your documentary.
Oh,
Just
thank you.
being able to see people who clearly don't agree
Right.
from two opposite ends of the spectrum, but have a conversation and it be civil.
Yeah, I just
And
think life is so much better that way. Yeah. Thank you. That means so much hearing that.
Well, that is it, Alex. Thank you, everyone who's watching this. Please go check out A Sexplanation. You can find them on Instagram. They're going to be streaming on all of your major platforms. You can watch them on Fuse. And thank you for your time again, Alex. Peace.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.